Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation.
All hail the New York Giants!
Not quite. Did someone want to tell the Giants that the season started? I mean, my God. Yes, I know they're 1-1, which is where a lot of people had them projected at when the season began. But the way that they did it is mind-boggling. Because if you weren't able to tell, the Giants' offense flat out stunk. In Week 1, against the Dallas Cowboys, in front of a national television audience on Sunday Night Football, they got nothing going offensively and lost 40-0. The game was bad. When you turn over 3 times, only muster up 171 yards of total offense, and when your starting quarterback gets sacked 7 times and posts a passer rating of 32.4, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play, that is a horrible offensive showing. But look, teams get shut out and get off to bad starts all the time, and they bounce back nicely. The Pittsburgh Steelers in 1989 got shut out 51-0 in their opening game, and they made it to the playoffs. The New England Patriots in 2003 got shut out 31-0 in their opening game to the Buffalo Bills of all teams, and they won the Super Bowl. Things happen. It's just one game. But then, the Giants had to play the Arizona Cardinals, as in, the worst team in the league on paper. And they did not have any fire in their gut in the first half. Because after the first half of that game, they were down 20-0. Once again, not scoring a single point. In 5 drives in the first half, the Giants had 3 punts, an interception, and then they were unable to do anything before the half expired. In the first half, the Giants had 76 yards of offense. Do the math, and in 6 quarters of football, they had 247 yards of total offense. Most importantly, 6 quarters of football, and they scored 0 points. Literally, over the first 6 quarters of the season, 11 of you watching this video right now could be on the field, and you would not be able to do any worse in terms of points scored. That feels impossible, especially in today's day and age, when scoring is incredibly high. Even some of the worst offenses you can think of scored at least something over a 6-quarter period. But the 2023 Giants? Nothing. Again, they got things together in the second half and scored 31, so maybe something is finally clicking. But the first 3 halves of football, at least from an offensive standpoint, were ugly with a capital U. But just how bad were they? And just what does this mean for the Giants going forward? Well, let's just say that history is not on their side whatsoever. Not one bit. Because if you expect the Giants to make the playoffs again, and expect Daniel Jones to be the franchise guy, and expect the offense to pick it up, the odds are completely stacked against you. Because the 2023 New York Giants, no exaggeration, no hyperbole, no recency bias, are historically bad. How it works is like this. I looked at every single team in the history of the NFL since 1936 to do what the Giants did, which is to score no points in the first 6 quarters of the season. I looked at every team to get shut out in the first half of Game 1, get shut out in the second half of Game 1, and then get shut out in the first half of Game 2, laying a goose egg for the first 90 minutes of the season. Now, why is the cutoff date 1936? Is that an arbitrary year or cutoff date? Well, not quite. You see, 1936 was the first year in NFL history where there was a standardized schedule and where every team played the same number of games. Prior to 1936, each team played a different number of games, and scheduling was like the wild, wild west out there, where some teams would play 4 games, before another team even played one. In 1931, for instance, you had the Green Bay Packers playing 14 games, while the Chicago Bears played 13, the Chicago Cardinals played 9, the Cleveland Indians played 10, and the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets played 8. Every year since 1936, minus 2022 because of Damar Hamlin, each team has played the same number of games, so the weeks are completely standardized. I looked at the NFL and the two leagues that eventually merged with it, the AFL and the AAFC. So we've got nearly 100 seasons worth of data to go off of. And folks, the results are not pretty if you're a Giants fan. Not at all. Prior to the Giants this year, to find the last time that a team got shut out in their first 6 quarters to start the year off, we have to go all the way back to 1992 with the New England Patriots. In their first game against the Los Angeles Rams, they got shut out 14-0. In an awful game for them where they turned the ball over 5 times, and when their quarterback, Hugh Millen, got sacked 7 times and threw 4 interceptions. Their next game wasn't much better, as against the Seattle Seahawks, who would end up finishing the season with a 2-14 record, they lost the game while putting up no points in the first half, partly because of bad pass protection, seeing as Millen, 1 week after getting sacked 7 times, got sacked 6 times. As for how the season turned out, well, the Patriots ended the year with a 2-14 record while averaging just 12.8 points per game, with their 205 points scored being the second lowest total in the entire NFL, only behind the Seattle Seahawks. So yeah, that's not good company to be in. As a side note, to learn more about that 1992 Pats team, click the card in the upper right corner. Before the Patriots did it, you had this team right here accomplish this feat, as in the 1986 Pittsburgh Steelers. In their first game, they went on the road to take on the Seattle Seahawks and lost 30-0, in a horrible game where they mustered up just 9 first downs, averaged less than 3 yards per carry, and turned it over 5 times, while completing 9 out of 29 passes, or a completion percentage of 31%. For what it's worth, starting quarterback Mark Malone had a passer rating in that game of 2.8. I don't even know what to say to that. The Steelers followed that up by embarrassing themselves in front of a national television audience on Monday Night Football against the Denver Broncos, when they scored no points in the first half and once again struggled to run the ball, picking up just 30 rushing yards on 2 yards per carry, struggled to complete passes, completing just 45% of their throws, and struggled to hold on to the ball, turning it over 3 times. The season turned out to be an awful one for Pittsburgh, as they finished the season 6-10, making it the first time since 1969 that they had double-digit losses in a season. To be fair to Pittsburgh, the offense somewhat recovered, as they ended the year a respectable 18th out of 28 teams in points scored. But even that isn't very good, and that is an extreme outlier in the data set, as you're about to find out. Then, we have to go back to the 1970s, and go to 1978 when this team, the Baltimore Colts, did this. Their first 2 games were an absolute train wreck, and I talked about their opener, a Monday Night Football bloodbath against the Dallas Cowboys that might truly be the worst Monday night game of all time. You can learn more about that game by clicking the card in the upper right corner. The Colts lost their first game of the season 38-0, while picking up just 9 first downs, while picking up under 200 yards of total offense, and while getting sacked 5 times and turning it over 3 times. Then, against their division rival in the Miami Dolphins, they got battered even worse, not scoring a single point in the first half, or the entire game for that matter, as they lost 42-0 thanks to a whopping 7 turnovers. This was a bad omen for the season for the Colts. Not only did they finish the season 5-11 just 1 year after winning the AFC East and making the playoffs with a 10-4 record, but they did so by averaging just 14.9 points per game, which was the second worst total in the league, only marginally better than the San Francisco 49ers. You also know that you're in bad company when this team right here is occupying space there, as in, the expansion 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, what is there to say about these guys? In Week 1, they lost 20-0 to the Houston Oilers in a game where they only had 8 first downs, only had 110 yards of total offense, got sacked 6 times, and completed just 9 out of 26 passes. 2 out of 3 ain't bad when it comes to meatloaf. But when it's the number of throws that hit the ground, that's not good. And the following week, they didn't score in the first half, or the entire game for that matter, as they lost 23-0 to the San Diego Chargers while picking up 5 first downs, turning it over 4 times, and picking up -4 net passing yards. Seriously, you sitting on your couch right now watching this video, even if you were not even alive back then, had more passing yards than the Bucs did in this game, thanks to completing 3 out of 18 passes for an abysmal completion percentage of 16%. As for how the Bucs did that season, they averaged 8.9 points per game, had the worst total in the league by a country mile, and went winless, going 0-14. Good job. Now, for the remaining teams on the list, there's no video available because it was so long ago. So I'm just going to show the lowlights from the Giants on offense in the Cowboys game and the first half of the Cardinals game to illustrate the company that they're in. I'll just zoom by these remaining 8 teams as fast as I can in the interest of time, especially since there's no footage to accompany their ineptitude. In the AFL in 1961, the Oakland Raiders lost 55-0 in the first game against the Houston Oilers and scored no points in their second game, a 44-0 loss to the San Diego Chargers. They finished the season with a 2-12 record and had the worst offense of the 8 teams in the league, averaging 16.9 points per game. In 1949, the Green Bay Packers lost their opening game 17-0 to the Chicago Bears after turning it over 6 times and not completing a single pass, going 0-13 with 4 interceptions, and then got shut out in the first half the following week in a 48-7 drubbing at the hands of the Los Angeles Rams. They ended the season 2-10 and averaged just 9.5 points per game, which was last out of the 10 teams in the league. The previous year, in 1948, the Boston Yanks lost their first game 31-0 to the Green Bay Packers after 5 turnovers. They got shut out in the first half of their second game, a 27-7 loss to the New York Giants, where they turned it over 7 times. They ended the season 3-9, and by averaging 14.5 points per game, they were second to last in the league in total offense. That same year, in the AAFC, the Chicago Rockets lost 7-0 to the Los Angeles Dons, then got shut out in the first half at a 42-7 loss to the Buffalo Bills, where they somehow turned it over 9 times. Chicago finished that season 1-13, and by averaging 14.4 points per game, they had the worst offense in the 8-team league. In 1945, the Chicago Cardinals lost 10-0 in their opening game to the Detroit Lions, in a game where they turned it over 5 times, had 88 yards of offense, and had just 2 first downs. Then they followed that up by getting shut out in a 21-0 loss to the Cleveland Rams, where they only had 6 first downs, oddly enough, 88 yards of offense, and turned it over 5 times. Deja vu. The Cards went 1-9, averaged 9.8 points per game, and were 9th in the 10-team league in points scored. In 1943, the Brooklyn Dodgers got shut out 27-0 to the Detroit Lions in a game where they had 82 yards of offense, 5 turnovers, and -2 rushing yards. And they followed that up with a 17-0 loss against the Steagles, with, and I don't even know how this is possible, -33 rushing yards. You heard that right. 2 games into the season, and the Dodgers had -35 rushing yards. Brooklyn finished the season 2-8 while averaging 6.5 points per game, which was 8th in the league out of 10 teams. How 2 teams somehow did worse than 6.5 points per game beats me. In 1942, the Detroit Lions lost 13-0 in their opening game to the Cardinals and lost 14-0 in their second game to the Cleveland Rams, turning it over 9 times across the 2 games. They ended the season 0-11 while averaging 3.5 points per game, or 38 points for the entire season. Unsurprisingly, this was dead last, and would be the last time ever that the Lions ended a season winless. Side note, The Bears beat the Lions 42-0 in Week 11, meaning that they scored more points in that one game than the Lions did all season. And finally, the Lions appear on this list again, as in 1941, they lost 23-0 to the Green Bay Packers in their first game and got shut out in the first half of their second game against the Brooklyn Dodgers. They ended the season 4-6-1 while averaging 11 points per game, ranking 7th in the league out of 10 teams. So there you have it. You can see it on your screen right now. Those are the 12 infamous teams that the Giants share company with. Of those 12 teams, not a single one of them made the playoffs. Not a single one of them ended the season with a winning record. Heck, not a single one of them even came close to finishing the season 500. Of the 12 teams, 4 of them finished the season with the worst offense in the league, and another 4 had the second worst offense in the league. All 12 of them had an offense that was comfortably in the bottom half of football. And combined, the 12 teams finished the season with a record of, get ready for this, 28, 127-1, which is a winning percentage of 18%. 18%. This means, on average, the Giants would be expected, over the course of a 17-game season, to win anywhere from 3 to 4 games this year. That's what the history tells us. That's how bad the Giants started off this campaign offensively. It truly is historically bad territory. Now, to be fair to the Giants, even though they are in historically bad territory, and they join the 12 teams on the list to become unlucky number 13, there is one big difference, and that is the fact that they are the only team on that list that actually won one of their first 2 games. They came back and beat the Arizona Cardinals, and they did so by scoring on all of their drives in the second half. So who knows? Maybe they will turn things around, and maybe they won't end up like every other team on this list. But as we found out for this team behind me right here, history is clearly not on their side. Does this mean that the Giants will be bad in 2023? Does this mean the offense will be an eyesore the whole season? Not necessarily. But when you're in the same company as 2 winless teams in the 1942 Detroit Lions and the 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and a bunch of teams from the 1940s, when scoring was nowhere close to what it was today, and where there are very few people who attended a game back then that are even alive now, that's a problem. That's a major problem. Because if the New York Giants are going to turn things around, at least based on what history says, they have a giant battle ahead of them. Because as of now, they are truly historically bad. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.